I'm glad to be here today. Basically, what I'm going to talk about today is that I was told to talk a little bit about our background, what we are doing right now, where we're moving into, and also what's next, why we are the next billion-dollar startup. So of all the three companies today, I guess we are the newest and probably also the smallest of them. But still last year, we did around $11 million in gross revenue throughout our games. That's over around 25 million downloads. And we also, over the last year, grew from around 20 people to over 100, based out of Bangkok and Manila. We are also located, we also have registered in Singapore and Hong Kong that are more for distribution purposes and looking to also open up in more countries around Southeast Asia and the rest of the globe. Some of our titles, most of them until now, has been into the more very casual match 3 genre. We have our own match 3 platform within it, but the most famous one of those, I'm guessing, would be Juice Cubes, that are also distributed together with Rovio, at least until this year. We will relaunch that game as well, as long as with a lot of other titles, including some more mid-core, such as Ranch Run. As you have probably seen a few numbers today around Southeast Asia, I still want to share why this is an amazing market, because most of our revenues until now actually has been done on a Western market, with around 67% of that being US, but we are really moving our focus to Southeast Asia, where we are based, even though like half of our company is actually foreign and based over the entire world. We want to move the focus here to Southeast Asia, because we can just see it's growing. If we look at the population of around a little bit over 600 million people, we can compare it to a country within mobile games, like, for example, Korea. If you look at the total download volume today, you will have around the same size of downloads, same amount of downloads in Korea as you will have in Southeast Asia. You have around 4 times more Android downloads than the iOS downloads. However, if you look at the revenue, you have 4 times more revenue in Korea right now, because it's a lot more developed market than Southeast Asia, and you also still have around 30% more revenue on iOS over Android when you talk in-app purchases. If we do, however, look at some of our bigger neighbors like Japan, they are again 4 times bigger than actually Korea. But I think this shows a great potential of actually how the users in Southeast Asia will actually grow over the next few years. If we look at a little bit more data, these ones from App Annie, so this is a year-on-year growth index for that. If you look at countries like Thailand and Malaysia, you can actually see a year-on-year growth of over 100% in terms of download, with around the region being around 50%. The interesting point is that the total game market here doubled in revenue last year and will most likely double in revenue again next year. If we look and compare that to US, it was more like 30-40% growth on it. So we can really see that our user base here is getting a lot more valuable throughout time to also sell for advertisement and those parts. So what we are focusing on a lot now is actually doing land grabs in Southeast Asia throughout the time. If we look at the download ranks in Southeast Asia, and the reason why I see Southeast Asia still as one country, or at least in the gaming side, if we look at the top downloaded games in Southeast Asia, most of these games are still Western games. The market's simply been neglected for so long that the games are still being played here, are the Western ones, with 4 from LAN, 3 from North Asia, and 2 from around Southeast Asia. But where there's still a little bit luck in the market is that if you look at the revenue, most of the games today making the most money are actually games coming from Northeast Asia. So games that have more local content and more live operations, because if we look at how mobile games are, you have the Western companies that are a little bit less focused on live operations, the campaign, the weekend tournaments, and if you look more of the Asian countries, especially China and Japan, they are really good at doing these weekend dungeons, as you see in Puzzles and Dragons, and also getting it a lot more into all the other games, engaging with the community on those parts. So we can see that we can actually combine the market in terms of the genre, the looks of it, but then localize the live operations for each country and maximize the revenue that way. So what's next for us? The way we build up the company are based around these small game teams that are small units. You basically have a producer that has one title and an entire team made of game developers, artists, animators, QA even within that. They focus and they take full control over that title. Even things that I say cannot overrule their decisions in it. They have full power from within. Because what we can see is that with the competitive market we're in today, we need to focus a lot more on the analytics tools we have, the QA, and all these services that all the game teams, they basically depend on. So we centralize analytics, QA, the marketing with user acquisition, backend servers, social platforms and payments, like the code that you can't really mess up and the things that have to work all the time. We centralize that in so the game teams don't have to worry about it, that the servers are up and the payments are working, and also that the services teams actually handle to make sure that the games are always on the latest platforms with the latest updates and those parts as well. We then, of course, also do training and in tech and design for all the people in all the different game teams. What's interesting about this model and why we are moving this way is that we could see that by centralizing a lot of these units and by having so small individual game teams, we can actually also take external game teams now and put them in-house. So what we have done at least a few times before is take small game teams that we scout for in Southeast Asia with 5 to 10 guys that are doing a great game, but they don't really know how to do the full quality assurance, they don't really know how to do the full user acquisition or analytics for those parts today. So we basically today now bring them in, like buy half of the game, bring them in-house, double their team size with whatever they need of resources. If they're weak on art, we help them with the art. If they're weak on the backend servers or QA, we help them with those parts as well. So our strategy for the next 3 years of growth in Southeast Asia is both to find and create the best games from Southeast Asia to still a global market. Because we can see that there is a heavy growth in Southeast Asia. The cash cow is still on the Western markets for us. But within the next 3 years, we can also look at actually starting publishing the best global games in Southeast Asia. So as we are expanding out in Southeast Asia with new offices in Southeast Asia to find the local content, these offices will later be turned into culturalization and localization for the different economies. So we are sure to have the right live operations in those parts within every country and culture. Other tools that we also build in-house are tools that are also useful for other gaming companies. So for example, we are also testing out with individual business units like TestShip, where it's why hire one game QA when you can engage 1,000 and pay only for the results. If you're small game developers, you might not have a QA, and this is where you can actually go in on our platform of crowdsourced testers and say, I want to pay $2 for any bug that they find. You put it out and you engage all the testers to actually find the bugs in your game. If you are a bigger company like Gameloft and the others, you might want to be more afraid of your security breaches or payment bugs or anything else. So you might want to put in a bug hunting fee of a few $1,000s for any bug found on a live game. So in this way, we're actually taking some of the internal tools that we have been using over the years and also opening up for the public to either make separate business units, open source them, or keep them for internal publishing for those parts of the games. Our expansion in Southeast Asia also included acquiring Anino Games. That was the oldest game studio in Manila, been around for around 12 years. That happened last year. And also our latest partnership with Infinity Levels of doing this late stage accelerator, as we call them, where we help them with everything around the game. So we're basically looking for small game teams that have great content that we can help them push to a global market, and also other partners within the gaming industry. That was all I had for today, and a little bit shorter one, but thank you.